You ever have one of those moments where the universe stops, like a frozen frame in a movie, and you realize everything you thought was solid ground is just quicksand? That was me, standing in the dim light of our bedroom, listening to my wife giggle into her phone. I was already suspicious. Not the kind of suspicion that explodes overnight, but the slow-burning kind. The kind that starts as an itch in the back of your mind, late nights out, smudges of lipstick that weren't hers, that subtle change in how she touched me like I was furniture. So I started paying attention, and tonight I caught her red-handed. She was sitting on the edge of our bed, her back to me, one leg crossed over the other, swinging like she didn't have a care in the world. Her voice was soft, teasing. "When will you get me pregnant?" At first I thought I misheard her. Maybe it was some stupid game she was playing. But then she laughed, low and sultry. "I don't care what he wants. This baby's gonna be yours. Imagine his face when he realizes it." I felt my throat tighten. Heat rose from my gut, a sickening burn that clawed at my ribs. My hands clenched at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. I took a step forward. The floor creaked. She whipped around so fast the phone nearly tumbled from her hand. Her eyes, those same eyes I once got lost in, widened, but only for a second. Then, just like that, she smirked. "How much did you hear?" she asked, tilting her head. I couldn't speak. My mouth had gone dry. She sighed and rolled her eyes. "You can drop the hurt husband act. It doesn't suit you." She slipped off the bed, walking toward me, her hips swaying like she still had me wrapped around her little finger. When she got close, she leaned in, lips grazing my ear. "Don't even think about doing something stupid," she whispered. "Because if you do, you won't just be ruining your life, you'll be ruining your boss's too." My boss. The words clicked into place like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. The man who signed my paychecks, the man I spent years proving myself to, the one who held my entire career in the palm of his hand. My stomach twisted. She grinned at my silence, brushing her fingers over my chest before turning back to her phone. "I'll call you later, babe," she purred and ended the call. Then she just walked past me as if she hadn't just shattered everything. I stood there for a long time. I wasn't stupid. I knew what she expected me to do. Nothing. She thought I'd swallow it, tuck my tail between my legs, and keep playing the good, obedient husband. But she underestimated me. An hour later, the cops called, and her night, no, her entire life, was about to take a turn she never saw coming. I should have seen it coming. I should have known. But love makes you blind. We met in college. She was the kind of woman who could turn a whole room into her stage just by walking through the door. Hair that fell in waves over her shoulders, eyes like burning honey. She had a laugh that could make you feel like the funniest man alive, and I was stupid enough to believe I was special because she chose me. We were young, broke, and full of dreams. I worked nights while she studied. I gave up parties to help her cram for exams. She told me I was her rock, her future, and when I finally had enough saved for a ring, she said yes before I could even finish my proposal. I thought we were perfect. We had 2 kids together, Emma and Ryan. Emma's 7, sharp as a tack. Ryan's 4, still in that stage where he thinks I'm the strongest man in the world. They love me, or at least they used to. The injustice of it all? I broke my damn back for this family. I worked 12-hour shifts, took overtime whenever I could. While she went out with friends, I was the one at home, making sure homework got done, making sure Ryan brushed his teeth before bed. I was the one up at night when they were sick, running cold rags over their foreheads, whispering to them that everything would be okay. And what did I get for it? A wife who laughed into her lover's ear, plotting to have his baby while using me as a goddamn safety net. An hour after she warned me, the police called. "There's been an incident," the officer said, voice clipped, professional. "Your wife needs to come to the hospital." She barely looked up from her phone when I told her. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. But when we got to the hospital, the second she stepped into the room, she screamed. Because the man lying in that bed, wrapped in bloody sheets, was her lover, my boss. I didn't even need to lift the blanket to know what was missing, but she did. Her hands shook as she peeled it back, and when she saw it, or what wasn't there, her legs buckled beneath her. I caught her before she hit the floor, and for the first time in years she looked afraid of me. She clung to my arms, trembling. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. I could feel her nails digging into my skin, but I didn't shake her off. Not yet. The man in the hospital bed, my boss, was moaning weakly, his face pale, his eyes darting in panic. There was a bandage wrapped around his lower body, soaked through with red. The sight of it should have made me feel something, maybe horror, maybe pity. But all I felt was satisfaction. I leaned down close to her ear. "What's wrong, babe?" I whispered, echoing the same sickly sweet tone she used on the phone with him. "Not the man you remember." She shoved me away. "You—" Her voice cracked. "What did you do?" I smiled. "I don't know what you're talking about." The truth, she thought I'd never know. She wasn't just cheating on me. Number, that would have been too simple. She was using me, and she had been from the beginning. See, my wife, correction, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was never in love with me. I was the safe bet. The reliable guy who'd never leave, the idiot who'd work his fingers to the bone while she did whatever the fucking she wanted. And the pregnancy? That wasn't some twisted game. She wanted leverage, because my boss, her lover, had a wife of his own, and a fat inheritance that his wife controlled. If she got pregnant, she could have forced him to leave his wife for her, and if he didn't, she'd still win because I'd raised the bastard thinking it was mine. It was a win-win for her. Except she underestimated one thing. Me. Nuclear revenge. "You ruined everything," she whispered, still kneeling on the cold hospital floor, staring at the mutilated man she once called Daddy. I crouched beside her. "Nah, babe," I grinned. "I just leveled the playing field." She turned to me, tears streaking her face. But they weren't real tears. No, she wasn't crying because she regretted what she'd done. She wasn't crying because she loved me. She was crying because she lost, and she knew it. The setup. It was easy. My boss had power, but he also had weaknesses. And those weaknesses came in the form of very dangerous people who didn't like it when a man like him stepped out of line. All it took was one anonymous tip, one whispered word about how my boss was skimming money from the wrong people, and just like that, they paid him a visit. Oh, they didn't kill him. That would have been too merciful. Number. They made sure that the only thing he'd be good for now was sitting in a wheelchair and regretting every Fing decision he ever made. And the best part? I wasn't even in the room when it happened. No weapon, no fingerprints, nothing to tie me to it. I was home with my kids, making dinner like a good, loyal husband, and when the cops came sniffing around, I just smiled and said, "Oh my God, that's terrible. I hope they catch whoever did it." Checkmate. The hospital room was silent except for the weak, pathetic whimpers of the man in the bed. My wife sat there, staring blankly at the floor. She'd lost everything. And I was finally free. She sat there, frozen while the realization seeped into her bones. Her lover, her golden ticket, her way out, her backup plan was ruined. Not just injured, not just humiliated, destroyed. And me? I was watching her crumble, piece by piece. I should have felt angry. I should have felt betrayed. But all I felt was victorious. The lies that started it. All I used to think she loved me. Back when we were young, when she would look at me with those big, innocent eyes, and I was too stupid to see the calculation behind them. But she never loved me. No, my wife was a survivor, a user, a woman who didn't want love. She wanted control. She chose me not because I was special, but because I was safe. I was the man who wouldn't question the late nights, who would excuse the cold distance, who would break his back for his family while she played her little games in the background. I was insurance, and my boss, he was the thrill. The man with money, power, the man who could give her something I never could, a risk. Except now? Now he was a shell of himself, a man who had been made an example of, and she was left with nothing. She tried to run, but it was too late. I saw it in her eyes the moment the reality hit, the gears in her head turning, the panic setting in. She thought she was so smart, that she could fix this, that she could slither her way out like she always did. She scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking. I need to go home, she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I stepped in front of her. Her breath hitched. Going somewhere? I asked, tilting my head. Her lips parted, but she didn't have an answer, because she knew she wasn't getting out of this, the ultimate betrayal, and the final move. You don't understand, she whispered, voice cracking. I had to do it. I had to. I stared at her, waiting, and then she did something I never expected. She dropped to her knees, hands clasped together, tears streaming down her face. She was begging. Please, she sobbed. Please, I was scared. I needed security. I needed security? I laughed, a sharp, cold sound. You mean you needed options? Her eyes darted to the door, calculating again, always calculating. But she had no moves left, because the moment she opened her mouth to beg again, the cops walked in, the setup she never saw coming. She thought she was so damn smart, but I had been planning this for months. I had dug through everything, our finances, her hidden texts, her secret emails, and when I found out she had been stealing money from my boss's company, oh, that was the final nail in her coffin. I made a single call before we arrived at the hospital, and now she was about to learn what real betrayal felt like. The officers stepped forward, their expressions blank, professional. Mrs. Carter, you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. Her head snapped toward me, her face twisting in horror. You! I smirked. Oops. They yanked her up from the floor, snapping the cuffs around her wrists. She thrashed, screamed, cried. But the moment they dragged her out of that hospital room, I finally took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I felt free. She screamed my name as they dragged her away. You set me up. You fucking set me up. Her voice echoed down the sterile hospital corridor, raw with betrayal. I didn't flinch. I didn't chase after her. I didn't beg the officers to stop. I just stood there, watching as the woman who had once vowed to love me forever was hauled away like the criminal she was. And as the elevator doors closed behind her, muffling her shrieks, I smiled. The fallout and the truth that broke me. The hospital was silent now. The only sounds left were the beeping monitors from the man in the bed, the man who used to be my boss, my superior, my fucking idol. Now he was just pathetic. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a weak, pathetic wheeze. I pulled up a chair beside him, slow and casual, like we were old friends catching up. You really thought you could take what's mine and walk away, I said, voice calm. His eyes flickered with terror. I should thank you, really, I continued. If you hadn't fucked my wife, I'd still be a blind, loyal little employee. But now, I leaned in closer. Now I own you. His breathing hitched. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a little flash drive, and dangled it in front of his face. See, while you were busy screwing my wife, I was busy digging through your dirty laundry, I murmured. Bank fraud, offshore accounts, fake charity donations. Oh, and the best part? I grinned. Your boss knows. His entire body jerked in panic, because he knew what that meant. The real men in charge, the ones who didn't tolerate disloyalty, the ones who didn't settle things with lawyers, would be coming for him next, and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. The final goodbye. I stood up, stretching like I had all the time in the world. You and my wife deserve each other, I mused. Too bad neither of you will get what you wanted. He tried to say something, maybe a plea, maybe a threat, but I didn't care anymore. I walked out without looking back. And when I stepped outside, inhaling the crisp night air, I felt lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I was no longer a husband, no longer a fool. I was just me, and I was finally ready to start over. The house was quiet when I got home, too quiet. For years, I had walked through that door expecting to hear her voice, calling out from the kitchen, laughing on the phone, lying through her teeth. But tonight there was nothing. No perfume lingering in the air, no faint sound of her shower running upstairs, no trace of her presence at all. She was gone, and she was never coming back. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. The weight on my chest, the weight I had carried for years, was finally lifting. And then, "Daddy?" I turned, and there they were. Emma, standing in her pajamas, clutching her little stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with sleep and confusion. Ryan, rubbing his tiny fists against his eyes, still half asleep. "Where's Mommy?" Emma asked. I knelt down, steadying my voice. "Mommy had to go away for a while, sweetheart." She frowned. "Is she coming back?" I hesitated, then softly, "No, she's not." There was a long silence. Then Emma nodded, like she understood more than she should at 7 years old. Ryan shuffled closer, his little arms wrapping around my neck. "I love you, Daddy," he mumbled into my shoulder. Something inside me cracked. I hugged him tight, feeling the warmth of his tiny body against mine. "I love you too, buddy." And this time when I said it, when I held them close, knowing that no one was lying, no one was scheming, no one was using me, I finally knew it was real. The nightmare was over. And for the first time in my life, I won.